Hello everybody and welcome back. If you are new here, my name is Brittany and on this channel we talk all about plants. And today I really need to sit down and start looking at my plants that need repotted because of course I have been putting it off. So I figured you could tag along with me and we could talk about 5 tips in knowing that your plants need repotted. So if you are into plants and into plant care, stick around and let's talk repotting plants. Okay, first things first, I just got off of work and I need to make dinner. So we are having Marry Me Chicken tonight. So I figured I'd share that a little bit with you guys and then we will get into some planty chores. So first things first, you are going to take your chicken breasts, or we are using chicken thighs. You are going to dredge those in some flour with some salt and pepper, and we are going to put those into a pan with some butter and get them cooking. All right, so we've got that flour all dredged onto that chicken. I did about 2 tablespoons of butter and 2 tablespoons of oil in the pan. And we're just gonna cook those until they are browned on both sides, probably about 4 to 5 minutes. All right, we've got this beautiful chicken, removed it from the pan. I added some garlic, let it cook for about 30 seconds, and then I did add some chicken stock, about a cup to just deglaze. I'm letting this cool down just a little bit before I add about a cup of heavy whipping cream. All right, so we finished the recipe after I added the cream in. I seasoned it to taste, added in some sun-dried tomatoes, and then just let it simmer until it started to thicken. When it was about done, I re-added that chicken in there. We did serve it over mashed potatoes, and I added some red chili flakes on top, and it was so good. So I will let you see what that looked like finished. The dog, she's on the table. Guys, this dog. Give me tips. How do you keep your dog from jumping up, especially if you have a basset? Okay, dinner was amazing. Got into some comfy clothes. Let's get into these repotting tips. Tip number 1, if your plant is growing out of the bottom of the pot, it is a surefire sign that this plant needs repotted. And so we are going to be looking at this philodendron split leaf. Look at these beautiful leaves. And while it's not fully growing out of the bottom yet, I do want to get this thing repotted while it is still warm out, because I can see all of the roots growing in this pot, and I know it's going to need a repot sooner than later and is going to start growing out of the pot. This is something to kind of consider when you are in the warm weather months, because as the days grow cooler, sometimes our plants will be less welcoming of a new pot. So if you can kind of anticipate what's going to be happening to your plants in the next couple of months and plan ahead, it can be beneficial for them. So I know this guy, he's seen better days. He's starting to dry out significantly quicker. So I'm gonna go ahead and just put him in a new pot, let him acclimate before it really starts to get dark outside and cold outside. So the first thing I'm gonna do is just gently remove this guy. He came out just like this from this old pot. It is at the end of the watering cycle, so it needs re-watered soon. So this is the great time to do it because it'll come out of the pot a lot easier. And then you can put it into the new pot and water it in, make it all happy. I'm just kind of tickling these leaves, just loosening it up a little bit. I don't want to disturb the root ball too much, but I do want to get some of that old soil off so it has room to grow out. Just like that. Plop them in that new pot, get them nice and cozy. Now, the soil that it was in was not a bad soil because it was my mix. So I just placed it right back in there. I know that it wasn't drying out because of soil issues, because this looks great. it really was just kind of outgrowing its space and needing a little bit more pillow for what it was. Okay. So we're just gonna refill this back up. Okay, I'm just getting this guy all cozy. Does anyone have one of these? This was a cutting that I had taken from my grandmother, that she has a plant that is, it's gotta be 25 to 30 years old in her living room. It was a family plant from one of my family members that she took at her passing. And so I took this cutting back in January. It rooted really nicely, and we've gotten 3 new leaves since then. And it's just like a rock star plant, like so easy, kind of a showstopper because of its size. So I really like this plant. It's not one of the like big popular ones, Tanner. One of the big popular ones, but like these leaves are just absolutely show-stopping when they get big like this. So give it a little stability with this just little pole here. And then I am gonna go water this in so that it feels nice and stable, gets accustomed to its new little home. And that is tip number 1. If the roots are looking really crowded in the pot and or are growing out the bottom, it tends to be a sign that your plant needs a new pot. But make sure you do your research, because there are some plants that like to be really tight and cozy. Things like ZZ plants, monsteras to some extent, do not need a new pot every few months. They like to feel nice and cozy, so you can kind of hold off for a little bit longer on those ones. But in the meantime, this philodendron split leaf is in its new home for the winter, nice and cozy, comfy. And let's move on to tip number 2. Okay, tip number 2. If you notice that your plants are tending to slow down on growth to an excessive amount, it could be a sign that they are due for a repot. If the plant has nowhere to go in terms of the bottom, imagine it like being in a crowded room and you feel stuck. There's nothing for you to do. There's nowhere for you to go. Plants can start to feel like this also. And so if they're stunted in their growth, you're not noticing new growth, new leaves, this could be a sign that your plant might need a repot. You should really look into your watering first, as well as some fertilizing, but that might be the issue. So really consider what's going on with the plant. Does it need more water? Does it need more light? Does it need more fertilizer? If all of those are no's, it's probably time for a repot. This cute little Pilia peperomia has been growing like crazy, but it was stunted for a little bit. And at first, I thought it might be the pot size, but then it started growing again. And I think it was just in a little bit of a hibernation period. I know these guys are really kind of tricky. So if anyone has tips on these guys, mine tends to grow straight up and the leaves are really long. It's not like bunchy like everyone else's, but I do think it's because it does get so much light underneath my grow lights. So at this point, I'm not going to be repotting this because it recently had a little growth spurt. Look how cute that guy is. I really like this plant. But I'm gonna kind of keep an eye on it and see if it starts to falter in growth again and nothing else is working, we might be due for a little bit bigger size. Okay, so for tip number 3, we are talking about the yellowing of leaves. So if you have ruled out things like overwatering, underwatering, pests, especially in the season that we are just coming out of, your issue with yellowing might be overcrowded roots in that the nutrients are not getting to the full plant, not able to give nutrients to all of the leaves. So really do some analysis of your plant. Is there a watering issue? Is your soil really moist? Is it maybe retentive of moisture, like it's not allowing the moisture to like fully saturate the soil? Or are there potentially pests? Do you have some mites? Do you have some little bugs going on? Lastly, is it a Maranta who is super moody? This guy's a giant, still gets really super moody. So kind of look at your roots. See, I really like, you guys, the clear pots for all of these tips, because you can look at and analyze, look at this yellowing happening, the roots, and see if there's overcrowding that is happening. If it does not seem to be the case, you've stuck your finger in there, you're not feeling any roots, it looks fairly open, then that's when you get into, am I having a watering issue? Is there some sort of pest that's bothering my plant? Or do I have a Maranta who is moody? No matter what I do, it's gonna shoot off some yellow leaves. I'm gonna trim around them so it looks pretty. Nobody's gonna know because I'm doing a great job. So tip number 3 is check the roots. Are they overcrowded in that they're not getting enough nutrients? Okay, tip number 4 is the drying out of your plant. Are you having to water it more often than normal? It may be time to check your roots and consider a repot. This plant has been drying out a lot faster. It is a big boy and it is in this smallish pot. I did have, can you see, a little bit of roots growing out the bottom. It does look like a really full pot, but I did just repot this guy a few months ago, and Monstera, if you do your research, do really like to be tight in their pots. So I think I'm gonna hold off on this for a little bit, make sure that I'm giving it enough fertilizer, nutrients to keep the growth up. I did move it closer to a window, so it has that encouragement to consider like our growth. And if it continues to dry out really quickly and show no signs of new growth, that's when I'll really, sorry, I have a bug bite, itch. Really consider maybe putting it into a bigger pot. Right now, I'm not super concerned about it. I'm just watering it a little bit more often, fertilizing a little bit more often. But if you're having some rapid drying, it could be that your soil is no longer accepting that moisture, or the roots are overtaking the soil and it's not retaining the moisture. So if you feel like you're watering more often, check those roots. Might be time for a bigger pot. Excuse me. Okay, tip number 5 is related to the actual leaves themselves. When the plant starts to feel really top heavy, like it's going to tip over, it may be time for a new pot, because we really want to protect the integrity of the leaves, and damage, like a tip like that almost just fell on the floor, could be more detrimental to the plant. So if it's feeling really top heavy, like it's feeling like it's gonna tip over at any minute, look at the type of pot you have it in. Do you have it in a stable like planter pot? And then if so, and it's still feeling really heavy, it might be time for a wider base. The issue with this, and I'm going to talk a couple other tips unrelated, is if you go too big on plants like the ZZ, look at this beautiful, gorgeous Raven ZZ, or the snake plant, or the Monstera, you might have an issue with over moisture, where there's so much soil that it isn't drying out in time for the roots to get some aeration to them. That's when you hear about things like root rot, where the roots are just so moist that they like rot out. with distress if there is already something going on with your plant. Say they recently had some pest damage, they recently had some root rot. If you choose to repot them in that time frame, it may cause so much stress to the plant that they just like give up. So consider that. Make sure your plant is really healthy before repotting. Make sure that you have proper aeration when you're repotting. And the last thing is, if you get really cold weather like we do here in Wyoming, it can cause some stress to your plants if they're getting some draft and they're also getting less light because the sun is going down earlier. So it is typically advised for you to repot in the spring or in the summer. I am repotting some plants right now in the fall, and I'm just going to keep an eye on them and know that they may be going through this stress period and like extra baby them. So I'm not saying don't repot any time of the year. If they need a repot, they're drying out, they're growing out the bottom, they're unhappy, please repot your plants and then just give them a little extra love. So there are 5 tips for repotting your plants. I hope this helped some people with a couple questions. If you have more tips to add, please make sure you add those to the comments because we are here learning from each other, learning from our mistakes, and just going through the days. And if you like this community, please make sure that you subscribe and give us a like, and we will see you in our next video.